Hello everyone and welcome to my new video. In this video I will cover the topic of iteration. Iteration is a key feature in JavaScript, so it's important to really master it. Iteration or loops offer a quick and easy way to do something repeatedly. It optimizes your code and offer a clear and readable structure. So there are different loops depending on the data you want to iterate over. If you iterate over an array, you can use the traditional for loop or an array prototype methods. There are a lot of methods existing on array. On the object, you can use a for in method or a more modern approach with object.entries. And finally, over an iterable with a for of method. So let's start with traditional loops. Traditional loop is not very used anymore, but it's still useful if you use a break or a continue statement. So here you have an example of a traditional loop, where your initial expression I equals to 0. I should be lower or equal than 5. This is your condition expression. And the increment expression is the step of 1. So if you use the keyword continue, it will stop or terminate the current iteration. So it will log 0, 1, 2, 4, and 5. And if you use the break condition, it will stop the complete iteration. Here you have do while or while method. The only difference between these two methods is that do while first execute the statement and then check if the condition is true or false. If the condition is false, the statement will be stopped, the loop stops, while the while method first test if the condition is true or false and then execute the statement. If you want a more modern approach, you can use array.prototype.functions. You can find all the available functions on the official website. And since all these functions share the same function signature, I will present you the first one. So array.prototype.forEach is composed of two arguments. The first one is a callback. The second one, the value you want to set as the value of this. I made a previous video about defining the value of this through different contexts. A callback is a function that is passed as an argument to another function in order to be executed. This callback will be executed on each iteration and is composed of three arguments. Only the first one is mandatory, the other one are optional. Then you have the statement and the value you want to set as this. This argument is also optional. So here we have our example of for each. So here you have array.prototype.forEach, and this is the callback. There is no value passed as the value of this. This callback will be executed on each iteration and is composed by three arguments. So we will console log on each iteration a plus the value of the index plus the current element being iterated. So we will console log a01, a12, and a23. The choice of the function will depend on the operation being done. So for example, if you want to find the index of a certain item in an array, or you want to filter the array on a certain condition, but will also depend on the return value. If you want, for example, to return a boolean, you will use these functions, or if you want to return an array, you will rather use those functions here. So I will present you two functions, filter and reduce. So here you have the signature of the function. So array.prototype.filter, the element being iterated over, an arrow if you will use an arrow function, and then the condition. Here we have the array, and here array.prototype.filter, the element being iterated over, so it will be JavaScript, Python, PHP, and so on, an arrow, and then the condition. So on each iteration, a boolean will be returned, and if it's true, the value will be selected. So on the first iteration, JavaScript will return true, true, and false, false, and true. And because array.prototype.filter returns an array, we will end up with this result. Here we have the example with reduce. Reduce is an interesting and powerful function and is not always good understood. So here you have the signature of the function that accepts a callback and an initial value. The callback is composed of 4 arguments. Only the 2 first one are mandatory. After the callback, you have the statement and then the initial value, which is optional. Here you have the array. Then here array.prototype.reduce. This is our callback, the function reducer, and no initial value is provided. So the callback is composed by 4 arguments: previous, current, index, and array. Array is optional. If no initial value is provided, like in this example, the previous value and the current value will be equal to the first and the second item in the array. And we will start at the index 1, so the second item. If an initial value is provided, the previous value will be equal to the initial value, so the value that would have been here. And the current value will be equal to the first item on the array. And the index will start at 0. So here on each iteration, we console log the previous current index and the value of the addition. So because we did not provide an initial value, previous value will start at 15. Current value is the second item of the array, 16. The index is 1 because we start at the second item of the array. And we will, the returns, we will console log 31 since this is the addition of the 2 first items. And so on, we will continue until the end of the array. You cannot use regular array methods to loop over objects. You should use instead the for in statement. So here we have an example with the object capitals, with key the countries, so France, Belgium, Germany, and with value the capital. So here we use the for in statement. It iterates a specified variable over all the enumerable properties. It means the key of an object. So here we console log the key, France, Belgium, Germany, and with capitals of, for example, the first iteration France, which is Paris. So we will console log all the key value pair. If you want a more modern approach, you can use object.entries.anObject. Here is person. Object.entries will iterate for you, but it will return an array. with the key value pair. So our first item is first name John and then last name Doe, and it will thus return an array. If you only want the keys, you can use object.keys of person in this case. So it will console log first and last name. And if you only want the values, you should use object.values of the object here person to console log John and Doe. And finally, if you want to loop over an iterable, you should use the for of statement. An iterable can be a string, an array like object, a map, or a set. So here we have three examples. In the first example, we have the variable. This is our iterable JavaScript. So the signature of the for of methods is the following: for variable of iterable, and we console log the variable. So here we will console log each letter of the word JavaScript one by one. Then we have the map object. Map object holds the key value pair, and remember the original insertion, and returns an array. So we will console log the inserted value one by one in form of an array. And then the set object, it lets you store unique value, and we will just console log the value we inserted one by one.